With a new volume comes a new opening, and a whole lot of foreshadowing contained within its lyrics and its imagery. Before I get into analyzing it though, I will say spoiler warning for those who have not seen episode 1 of Volume 8, as a few of the things I'm going to mention in this video will spoil some of the events of that episode. So I will leave a link in the description below to Rooster Teeth First, where you guys can go and watch the episode there and support the series that we all love. Now, if things weren't pointing to Volume 8 being dark before this, they certainly are now, as the lyrics and imagery of this opening have a very foreboding atmosphere for a lot of our characters. The opening itself starts off showing the images of Mantle, shifted immediately into it being destroyed, overrun, and essentially looking like a battlefield. This is what RWBY is standing against. This is what all of our protagonists are standing against. The horror that will be brought once the battle for Atlas ensues. After this point, the lyrics start singing alongside the imagery, so I will go over the lyrics as a whole first, and then go over the imagery accompanying each individual line of the lyrics, as it seems to match up fairly well for a lot of different scenes. The lyrics of the opening start off as follows. We said goodbye to all the things we loved, gave up our lives, just to find that it was not enough. We leapt in faith, left our solitude, our carefree peace. What we thought would change the world was just a childish dream. We failed to stop our own demise. The tragic ends before our eyes. Hope has no place here. Maybe the path that leads our way home will finally clear. Maybe the end we tried to avoid is already here. Some roses will never bloom. Some dreams will rot on the vine. Some lives will end much too soon. Some evil will never, ever die. Some wars will not end in peace. Some heroes choose the wrong side. Sometimes it's worth it all to risk the fall and fight for every life. This song carries a very negative connotation with it for the majority of it up until the end. The first part of it, talking about giving up everything in their past to pursue this goal, is pretty much what every huntsman and huntress does as they set out. They give up the hope of living a normal life, having a peaceful childhood, for the opportunity to train and fight the evils of the world, fight against the grim. And as everyone found out at the end of Volume 7 and will find out throughout Volume 8, that seems like more of a childish dream to feel like you could actually win against this overwhelming evil. The next part of the song talking about tragic demise and that the end is already here. With Salem's arrival, that is going to be the case for a lot of characters. This is it. This is where their story will end. They will not travel any further than this point, and that thought has to be going through a lot of people's lives. Some roses will just never bloom. Some lives just come to an end before they reach their full potential, before they actually get to achieve anything in their lives or be explored to the fullest extent. As some characters have done throughout the RWBY series, they end up dying before we find out everything we want to know about them. That's just the way of life as it is, and honestly might be the case moving into Volume 8 that we might see with some of our characters. But it ends on a lighter note, that sometimes it is worth everything to risk it for a faint chance at hope, to keep pushing forward and hope that maybe you will be able to make it through. In this case, to risk everything on the dream of being able to save everyone. Like Team RWBY and Team Juniper have split up and gone their separate ways to pursue these different goals of 1, saving everyone in Atlas, and 2, saving everyone in Remnant by warning them about Salem. They are trying to achieve both of these goals and are risking everything for this dream. So taking the song as a whole might give an indication for the volume itself that it's going to be very dark and negative for the majority of it, with a faint glimmer of hope at the end, but we'll see how everything plays out. I feel like it's going to be dark all the way through, and maybe in Volume 9 there'll be some hope. But let me know your thoughts on the overall song in the comments below. Now, getting into the imagery that accompanies these lyrics, when it starts off saying, we said goodbye to the things we loved, we see images of each of the members of Team RWBY and reflections of the things that they have left behind. For RWBY, it is the grave of Summer Rose. She is actually following a similar path to her mother, one that presumably led to her demise, so we'll see if this is going to lead RWBY down that same path. For Yang, it is her home life, where she was standing with Zwei, her father, etc. This is a very happy place for Yang, and she left it all behind. For Weiss, it seems a bit more positive, as her childhood growing up in the She Manor wasn't exactly a happy one, but she left that behind to pursue this dream to become a huntress and fight against the evils of the world. And for Blake, the image that we see is one from the Black trailer, the one where she ended up on that train mission with Adam and left the White Fang behind to pursue change in a different route. All of them left their past behind to end up where they are now and have a fair bit of hope going into this, but now that they're facing against Salem, that hope isn't exactly as bright as it once was. Also, I just want to take a moment to appreciate the visuals contained within this opening, seeing the images of each of our four main characters and the reflections of their past, the things that they carry with them throughout their journey, the difficulties that they have faced and will face moving forward, not only in this volume, but even further past that. The memories that they carry with them, the lives that they left behind. The symbolism here is quite heavy and fits extremely well with the heavy connotations of this opening as a whole. I absolutely love this imagery, and it makes it one of my favorite openings in the RWBY series thus far. And then we see a similar image of Ironwood with a reflection of Atlas, where the song is saying, "Gave up our lives just to find that it was not enough," as the image or reflection in Ironwood of Atlas turns to one of Atlas on fire. We then see Clover's hand dropping his emblem, and a reflection of each of the members of the Aesops as well as Crow. The people that Clover has left behind. They tried so hard to pursue their goals, both Ironwood and Clover, and yet it doesn't seem enough. Whatever they tried, whatever orders they followed, just have started to crumble around them. But then the song continues with the image of Crow. "We leapt in faith, left our solitude," as a hand reaches out to Crow, this being Robin Hill, and it seems like these two are going to be working together from now on, and possibly creating a friendship similar to what Crow and Clover had, or possibly even more. And then the song takes it a bit further. After leaving solitude, they left their carefree peace, where we see an image of Oscar, where he seems to be imprisoned on the whale with black bars behind him, and then surrounded by Grimm, and then overshadowed by a transformed Salem, possibly showing that Salem might actually take on a different form by the end of the volume. I am really hoping that that is actually the case, that we do see a transformed Salem, that she can manipulate her own body with Grimm parts, similar to how she was able to attach the Grimm arm to Cinder and manipulate other forms of Grimm, giving the Barangles wings, etc. This would be absolutely amazing to see, and I hope it's actually ending up the case. But either way, the visuals tie in very nicely for this part of the song, with Crow leaving his solitude, finding more people that he can trust, and Oscar leaving his carefree peace, only to be imprisoned by Salem. So it seems to be working out a little bit better for Crow than Oscar, and this volume is really not looking good for Oscar as a whole, but, you know, hopefully he'll make it out of it relatively unscathed by the end of it. And then we see the weapons of Team RWBY, as the song is saying what we thought could change the world was just a childish dream. The weapons of Team RWBY lay on the ground, seemingly unused, and we see Jean standing strong with his sword in front of him, much like the King of Vale did at the beginning of the Great War, at least what was shown in the World of Remnant episode that featured the Great War. So, maybe that's hinting at something, that Jean is going to stand strong on the battlefield. But behind him, we see Ren and Nora growing ever distant. Perhaps the childish dream was that those two could live happily ever after, and is not foreshadowing good things for Ren and Nora. A lot of things in this opening and the volume as a whole aren't really foreshadowing good things for them, that they are growing apart and are reaching some conflict in the first episode of the volume, as probably is going to continue throughout the rest of the volume. Hopefully there will be some way for them to be happy together, and I really hope neither of them dies, but it's seeming more and more likely that one of them might end up dying, which doesn't forebode well for the Juniper death theory as a whole, but both of them are growing more distant. Nora turns around and we see a spark of electricity go by her face as she seems to have a bit of a shocked expression. Now, the thing with Team Juniper is that all of them are based on characters that end up dying in their respective stories. That happened with Pyrrha. Nora is based on Thor, which it happens to. Joan of Arc definitely happens. And Lai Ren is based on Mulan, who ends up taking their own life in their story. So the fact that Nora is turning around shocked, maybe that means Ren is gonna die? Wouldn't exactly fit with his story, as a lot of people are speculating that he's gonna be the last member of Team Juniper standing and possibly take his own life at the end of that. I don't think it's gonna go that route, but if Nora ends up dying, then he's gonna be very depressed and might throw himself into battle and end up death by battle in that way. So I really don't want that to be the case. I hope they will find some way to come together again. They have all of their friends there supporting them, so we'll see how it turns out for Ren and Nora as this volume progresses. We do need to explore a lot more of Ren's emotional state, why he was acting the way he was in Volume 7, but we'll have to wait and see how that one unfolds. Next, we see Weiss and Winter as they are approaching each other, the song saying, "We failed to stop our own demise." Weiss is looking directly forward. Winter is looking at Weiss, and as they pass each other, we see Winter with the armored cast, it seems that she has, or the metal cast that she has on her arm, and she's looking back at Weiss, where Weiss is still looking forward. And then we see Winter looking more solemn as Weiss continues to look forward. Weiss is carving her own path, and Winter is starting to look back and maybe regret some of the decisions that she's made in the past. Considering what we saw at the end of Episode 1 in Volume 8, where Ironwood just shot Councilman Sleet, she may be regretting some of her choices for being as devoted to Ironwood as she was up until now. Maybe should have seen some of his turning points in the past, and it might come to Winter wanting to follow Weiss, abandoning Ironwood and joining our main group. Hopefully Ironwood won't snap and do anything too radical, but with the way that it's progressing, he already seems to be on that road, so I'm curious to see how this is going to unfold. As I am with our next two characters, Whitley and Willow, as we see the Schnee symbol between them fall to the ground and shatter, as the song is saying, "The tragic ends before our eyes." So, I've been thinking that Willow is possibly going to have a tragic end to this volume, and this is seemingly hinting at exactly that. The Schnee emblem shattering is a pretty good indication that the Schnee Company as a whole might be reaching its demise. With Jacques being thrown in prison, being disgraced, the Schnee Company and its questionable labor practices as put in place by Jacques might just cripple the entire company now that everything is being brought out into the light. Not to mention, Salem's probably going to want it destroyed, and if Willow ends up dying, then there's pretty much just going to be the children left in charge. We don't exactly know what's going to happen with Winter. Weiss doesn't really want anything to do with the Schnee Dust Company, and Whitley may not be too eager to fill his father's shoes given everything that's going on now. I do think that Willow might have a tragic end, giving the last stand to defend Whitley, and I really hope we get to see at least one badass moment with Willow where we see her summoning. I want her to survive, but I have a feeling she might not. We know that Whitley is probably going to be rescued by Weiss. It was kind of foreshadowed in Volume 7, so I'm curious to see how everything's going to play out with the entire Schnee family. We know that Jacques is going to have some reappearance in Volume 7, but whether he'll be redeemed, whether he's going to end up dying, he wasn't in the opening at all, so, we'll see what ends up happening with him and the rest of the Schnee family. And then we get to the players and pieces of Volume 8, where we see a chessboard that Salem is the Black Queen standing on her side. All of her pawns turn to Grimm and start attacking. Ironwood being the opposing king, and all of his pieces are starting to fade to dust. How Salem has this unstoppable army, and Ironwood's actions are losing the faith of the people who once followed him. Not to mention, the chessboard seems to be crumbling around Ironwood himself, and he's losing his own footing and grasp on everything around him. On Atlas, on the relics, on the Winter Maiden, on his own military. Things are just falling apart for Ironwood, and he's becoming more and more drastic. Meaning, things aren't going to go well for Ironwood. At this point, it seems pretty inevitable that he will reach his demise, and I'm curious to see how it will progress up until that point, and what the tipping point actually will be, where he will meet his end. And then we get a little bit of foreshadowing for Watts, Pietro, and Penny as the song says, "Maybe the path that leads our way home will finally clear." It looks like Watts is manipulating technology and smiling mischievously as Pietro is on the other side of the mirror trying to work his way with technology as well. Maybe Watts is going to interfere with Amity itself, or perhaps he's going to interfere with Penny in some way, considering she is a technology in and of herself. Now, we see with Penny that the glass behind her starts shattering. She is very conflicted in where to go. Her reality has literally been shattered. She used to be a member of the Atlas military, fighting to free the world from Salem's control, following Ironwood's orders, and being the defender of Mantle. She's got pretty much none of that now. She still has her friends there to support her, but she thinks there could be more that she's doing, especially now that she just ended up with the Winter Maiden powers just out of the blue. And she feels like she could maybe take the relic to Salem and maybe stop the attack that way, or use the Maiden powers in some other fashion. She is very confused at this point, and if Watts and Pietro, their technological workings in this opening are for Amity, that could be one scenario, or perhaps it's Watts trying to hack Penny and Pietro trying to stop the hacking. And we'll see if that has an influence on Penny's mentality, and if that's even possible to hack Penny in general. I'm guessing Penny operates on a different encoding system than the security for Mantle or Atlas, so Watts might have a bit more of a difficult time hacking into Penny, not to mention he already needs to get access to her, and also break out of jail. There's a couple hurdles that he would need to jump through. But relating this scene more to the words of the song, that the way home might finally be clear. Penny, being very confused right now, might finally find the place where she actually belongs, where she feels at home. That likely being with her friends, or once the dust settles in the battle for Atlas, she'll find a new place in Atlas where she can belong, and that will be her new place in the world. So I'm really interested in seeing how the story is going to progress for Penny in this volume. And then we get another kind of solemn scene for Ren and Nora, as the song is saying maybe the end we tried to avoid is already here. We see a flower petal flutter by into Ren's hand, and as he clutches it, he is supported by Yang, Jean, and Oscar, the team that he is traveling with at the beginning of the volume, and presumably for a majority of the volume moving forward. Then we see a similar flower petal flutter by Nora, except she misses it, isn't able to catch it, and looks quite solemn for a moment before the rest of her group, Penny, Ruby, Weiss, and Blake, are there to support her and cheer her up a little bit. So if the lyrics of the song that this inevitable end already being here is referencing Ren and Nora, that doesn't bode well. It could be the inevitable end, meaning literally death, or it could mean the inevitable end to the relationship that they once had. They have been together ever since they encountered each other in, well, their past, what was revealed in Volume 4, when that attack on Kuroyuri happened and Ren and Nora stayed together. Ren rescued Nora, and they've been together ever since. And now they're drifting apart. Maybe this is the inevitable end that they're speaking of, not necessarily dying, but just the relationship coming to an end as it once was. And they're going to have to adjust to this afterwards. Maybe the relationship will be stronger. Maybe it will just be broken and never the same again. We'll have to see how things unfold for Ren and Nora as the volume moves forward. And then the lyrics of the song start reciting some inevitable ends. Some roses never bloom, but the scene that it shows is a bit more of a hopeful one. Ruby and Yang are smiling at one another as they are entering the battle, fighting against the Grimm. Seemingly everyone is united in this scene. Different than what we saw in the first episode, where everyone is conflicted, they are going their separate ways on their separate goals that each of them are prioritizing, but in this scene they're all united and fighting against them. We see a little battle montage where Ruby is fighting against the Grimm, Yang is fighting, Blake is fighting, Weiss is on her Queen Lancer, and we see the other members of Team Juniper fighting as well. But then we see everything pause as Cinder casually strolls through the battlefield without caring about anything around her. As the lyrics say, some dreams will rot on the vine, Cinder casually passes by Neo and Emerald without even glancing in their direction. Neo is just looking pretty pissed at Cinder right from the get-go, but Emerald's happy to see her, and then sad. Neo and Emerald standing next to one another, definitely hinting that Neo and Emerald are going to have a little bit of a bonding moment moving forward, and I really am looking forward to that. And hopefully both of them will either, well, they're going to end up leaving Cinder. I don't think Emerald would actually stab Cinder in the back, but Neo definitely wants to. We'll see if that ends up becoming the case, because Cinder is extremely dangerous, being a maiden, not to mention having the Grim arm and everything to go along with that, so maybe Neo will be a little bit smarter and just try to vamoose and get out of there. But the words of the lyrics seem to be referencing Emerald in my mind, that some dreams will simply rot on the vine, they'll fall apart while they're happening. Emerald is reunited with Cinder, something that she's been dreaming about for quite a while now, and it's falling apart right in front of her. And we're gonna see how that goes later on, that Cinder is just using everyone as pawns, and that's not really how you inspire loyalty. Salem does it through fear, and that seems to work pretty well considering she has an overwhelming amount of power, but in Cinder's case, she just treats everyone like dirt, and people don't really appreciate that. So, as everyone is appropriately guessing, probably Neo and Emerald are going to make a break for it. Mercury, on the other hand, I'm not too sure. The next part of the lyrics says that some lives will end much too soon, and we see that Cinder is in pain. I really don't think that Cinder's going to die in this volume. I think it's going to be very fitting that she meets her end in Volume 12, be one of the final bosses in RWBY. You know, clock strikes midnight, the 12th volume of the RWBY series, Cinder meets her end. I think that's probably the route that it's going to go, especially considering that in Volume 1, Salem said that she's going to be a vessel for all of the Maiden's powers. So that might actually come to fruition, all of the Maiden's powers in one person, and maybe that's not something that the second generation of humanity is meant to hold, that they are meant to have that much magic in them. With Ozpin and with Salem, it's a bit different. Salem is still in the same body that was the first generation of humanity that was born with all this magic, and Ozpin being a reincarnated soul, maybe two souls can handle all of this magic a little bit better than a single soul can. So perhaps if Cinder does actually get all of the Maiden powers, it will drive her insane, and she'll meet her end in that fashion. Her desire for power will be her own doing, and her overall evil nature, as the next part of the song says that some evil will never, ever die. And the fire that surrounds Cinder fades into all of the members of Salem's inner circle. We see Hazel, we see Tyrion, we see Mercury there, and then we see Salem as we see the relics in both of her eyes, the relic of knowledge and the relic of creation. This was surprising to me, seeing Mercury standing alongside all of Salem's lieutenants, essentially. So, considering Watts isn't there, maybe they're writing Watts off, or at least Salem is writing Watts off as a lost cause. He served his usefulness, and now Mercury is going to be the replacement? I mean, he is a trained assassin and seems to have a pretty cold mentality, not to mention he seems to be laughing in this fire, similar to Tyrion, though not as insane. He does seem happy about his position. Hazel seems a little bit saddened by his position. Maybe that Mercury's being that corrupted, maybe that he's starting to doubt his motivations in joining Salem, but considering all the atrocities done in the past, there's probably no forgiveness in general for him either, but I'm looking forward to seeing how the interactions between all of these characters will go, whether Salem maybe has a new appreciation for Mercury, or perhaps when she finds out that Neo was the one who actually got the Relic of Knowledge. I'm sure Salem probably understands the gist of it, that Neo is pretty useful in certain aspects, and once she sees Neo in action, she might realize that, okay, Neo was the one who did all the work, Cinder, you still did nothing, and we'll see how the relations within Salem's inner circle changes throughout this volume. Then, as we see the relics in Salem's eyes, it zooms in on the relics themselves, and we see a blue mist form from each of them. A little bit different shade of blue for the Relic of Knowledge and the Relic of Creation, so we know that there is a mist created from each one individually, and it spirals upward. Much like how the mist from the Relic of Knowledge spawned Jinn, the spirit of the lamp. So this is a good indication that there is a spirit within the Relic of Creation as well, and I'm really looking forward to seeing what that spirit is. I have my own ideas, but I would love to know your thoughts as well. The lyrics while this is happening says that some wars will not end in peace. And peace is just not an option for Salem. This is a pretty much straightforward thing. She's been pursuing this goal, her anger of the gods, her hatred of Ozpin, for years now. Hundreds, if not thousands of years. We're not exactly sure on the timeline, but Salem has held this grudge for a very long time, not to mention the grim corruption and hatred has influenced that, probably to a pretty significant extent, so I think this one's just pretty straightforward. Salem's not going to give up until she is defeated, if that is possible. And then the lyrics go further to say that some heroes choose the wrong side, as we see all of our protagonists seeming to stand strong and united. I don't think it's implying that they've chosen the wrong side, because we know that they haven't. Salem is pretty clearly set up to be the evil of the world. She has committed wrongs and atrocities, and is what the rest of humanity should be fighting against, but I'm curious to know what it exactly means by this. Whether it's showing our protagonists standing there and the other heroes who aren't standing with them, perhaps the Aesops and Winter Schnee, not actually standing with them, standing with Ironwood, which is the wrong side to choose, at least for the way it looks right now. So I'm curious to know if this actually has a connection, this exact phrase, with the scene that we see, and I'd love to know your thoughts in the comments below. But then we see the ground crumble underneath Team RWBY as they fall into what seems like almost the Fountain of Life. It's very similar to when Salem was dropped into the Fountain of Life by the God of Light, so that's some interesting symbolism there, and the lyrics are saying sometimes it's worth it all to risk the fall. You know, trying your best and failing, it's sometimes worth everything to do that for the slim chance that you might succeed. And we see Team RWBY fall into this lake as RWBY herself is reaching out for the relic of creation, this faint light that seems to be getting further and further away, and the grim arms around her are seeming to reach for it as well, and reaching further than she is able to at that point. She is falling deeper into darkness, away from the light, and the Grimm seem to be winning in the goal of getting the relic of creation. Salem already has one relic, and she might have two by the end of the volume, so yeah, very foreboding for the events to come. And then we get to the last part of the opening, where the lyrics say, "and fight for every life." Instead of seeing some highly detailed scenes, we see a few words on screen and some more scribbly images that paint an interesting picture. We see the words, "happy ever after," or "happy never again," implying that things could go very well or things are going to go very poorly. Again, this is probably going to be both are the case. Happy never again for some people in Volume 8 who don't make it past Volume 8, and then happily ever after for some people, presumably, if Salem is able to be defeated. She won't be defeated in this volume, I don't think. It will likely be at the end of the RWBY series and by some other ways than Atlas itself fighting against her, but these words don't really paint a happy picture for our protagonists. And the images we see alongside this are the image of the Grimm that Salem sends after Oscar, presumably, or at least the one who will help her get the questions from Jin. And we also see an image of Penny, as first her eye turns red, and then her entire image. This could imply a couple of different things. As we know with technology, there's, the red ring of death that is commonly known with the Xbox, so maybe Penny is having a glitch or an error, or perhaps this could be a reference to Watts trying to hack her, that she is being taken over, that her ideals might become corrupted, and she's going to become not necessarily evil, but different than what she once was, abandon the ideals that she previously had and pursue her own goals and do what she thinks is right rather than trying to get a consensus or going along with everyone else. And lastly, we see the weapons of Team RWBY fall to the ground, and the opening itself ends off with Crescent Rose seeming to be abandoned before the shattered moon. So overall, a pretty foreboding opening, showing that there's going to be a lot of dark things to come in Volume 8, though there are a couple of more positive scenes that we see. For example, Team RWBY, Team Juniper, and Penny all standing strong together. Notably, Crow and Robin are not standing there with them, but there is happiness in store for Crow because Robin is going to be there to support him. After he had Clover there to support him and kind of bring him out of that self-deprecating cycle he was in, he found a friend he could trust, someone whose semblance could literally counteract his own, the one that he hated so much. Now, losing him, that's going to drive him deep into despair again. But Robin, being with him the entire time, could keep him from falling down that hole. And I'm really curious to see how their relationship is going to develop, and how Team RWBY and Team Juniper, as well as Penny, are going to overcome the conflicts that are between each other, as well as their internal conflicts. We know that Yang has now questioned RWBY's leadership and her decision-making ability, so there's room to grow for RWBY in this volume, now that it's been brought out into the open, that, maybe she hasn't been making the right decisions. She's done fairly well for what information she had at hand, but she could have done things a bit better, made some decisions sooner. For example, just telling Ironwood the truth right from the get-go. The moment that Ironwood handed her the Relic of Knowledge, that's a pretty big sign of trust, and she should have said, you've shown us a lot of trust, so we should do the same. There's one thing we kind of left out. Ozpin's disappearance is a result of what Jin showed us, and we have some things to tell you about Salem. That would have been an easy resolution to all of this, but RWBY had to be, steadfast in her decisions. She's a leader. There was a lot of pressure put on her. Everyone was following her lead. So, you know, things are going to have to be worked out for Ruby, worked out for Yang, as well as everything going on with the Schneef family, and in Salem's faction there's going to be some falling outs, and things are going to be very different by the end of Volume 8, or at least the Atlas arc as a whole, versus how they are now. Everyone isn't going to exactly be as united as they are now on Salem's faction, or united as they seem, and everyone might be more united by the end of Volume 8, depending on how things unfold. At least the survivors are going to be more united. So we'll see how things unfold. Let me know your comments down below. What did you guys think of the Volume 8 opening? Is there anything that I missed? Likely there's at least a couple things given all of the different imagery that we saw, the connections between the lyrics and the images themselves. So let me know your thoughts down in the comments below. I'm really curious to know what you guys think. Hopefully you guys enjoyed this video, and if you did, make sure to subscribe to the channel, join the Guild of the Eternal Flame, tweet me at Phoenix Knight 7, and I'll see you guys in the next video.